are joined now by Jesse Rogers. He covers Major League Baseball for ESPN Chicago. Jesse, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
Jesse, we are just trying to make it. What a crazy season so far. I was joking last week. We were looking at standings or something, and we were talking about the Astros. And I said, "God, you know what? Outside of Brown, there's 9 out of 10 people can't name the Astros rotation." And my buddy sent me a stat the other day because he's kind of an Astros guy because of Jake Meyer and stuff. And I didn't realize their team ERA is 2.69 in the month of June, and it came down after yesterday. Like, what are we talking about with the Astros right now, Jesse?
Well, I mean, if you're a baseball fan, you should know Framber Valdez. That guy's been doing it for a long time. Man, he was masterful yesterday again. They're 21-9 basically over the last month. They're just the Astros. They just know how to do it. It took a little bit of time for them to sort of revamp and figure out who they were without Tucker, without Bregman. But Altuve is just a great player, great leader. He won the game yesterday.
Yeah.
And they're just a pitching machine, They just develop pitchers. Hunter Brown's the latest. There's a few other guys there as well. So they're just the Astros. That's all I could say. They just have kept this thing going for years. Some organizations just are able to do it even with turnover, whether it be front office, manager, turnover. And we've seen that with Houston over the years in both cases. But they just have a machine down there, and it took a little bit of time to find their footing, but here they are once again ruling the AL West.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about organizations. I don't know that people necessarily appreciate how different this team is from like 2017 to 2019 to 2022 to now. You mentioned some of those guys that are no longer in the fold for the Astros. I mean, in your mind, have they sort of taken I don't know. I always have this sense of who's the best, like, scouted and run organization in all of baseball. Do they have the crown for you in that, or is it somebody else?
Well, they're in the team photo for sure. I mean, just knowing their ballpark alone, like Isaac Paredes is not as good in other places, but he's darn
Yeah.
good there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Crawford boxes.
Good call.
Even Altuve, perfect for the Crawford boxes. You got to get the right-handed hitters, but it's what they've done on the mound that puts them in that team photo at the very, maybe near the top. Just the way they've acquired and developed pitching. It reminds me of Tampa Bay, who's done. There's like a few teams, Cleveland. There's just a few teams that are ahead of the game. Now Houston has payroll to go along with some of these on the edges advantages that they have. So it's that combination that has made them. It's hard to be this good for so long. It really is with that much turnover. But they've done it. I've done it. I mean, think about it. They subtracted Bregman and Tucker, and now we're into July and they haven't really missed a beat.
Interesting. I want to talk about just locally, just because of the flair and kind of it staying in your wheelhouse with the Cubs, what they're doing, almost double anybody else's run differential in that division. But they're an interesting offensive team. I think the only guy with over a 900 OPS is Tucker. I mean, Horner is leading them in BA, 290 or whatever. I always worry about their offensive sustainability, but like Pete Crow or Armstrong, when Baez and Trevor Williams were acquired, were you thinking, oh man, it's going to take me about 4 years to see if the Pete Crow Armstrong pays dividends? Is what the Cubs do offensively, in your opinion, how sustainable is it versus? I mean, I still don't even know who Suzuki is, but I watch what he does and I'm like, God, that it works somehow. How for the Cubs offensively for you?
Well, they're a combination of speed and power, which is what you need in today's game. I don't know why other teams haven't figured that out, especially teams that can't spend as much money. I mean, speed does not cost you as much money as power does. The Cubs have a combination of that, and I think some of the other good teams have the same. The Diamondbacks come to mind. But look, we're halfway through the season, and they're averaging 5.4 runs a game, second best in baseball. So you ask me if it's sustainable. I think the answer is yes, and it is because of what I just said. Up and down, it's a good combination of lefty, righty, power, and speed. That tells me it's sustainable. Some guys are streaky, but that's okay because other guys are more consistent. And when you get streaky, you get bad, and then you get good, and then you get bad and good, and in between is some consistency. So They have everything you need for a sustainable offense, and it is unique that that's the strongest part of their game. It's almost like what we used to call the stopper with an ace on the mound. In other words, Cubs haven't had many losing streaks of more than a few games because they can't go 5 games without scoring. I mean, Saturday in Houston was a great example. They're up 1-0. The Cam Smith homers to make it 2-1, and you're thinking, uh-oh, and they score 7 runs the next inning and win easily. Their offense has been their stopper, which, again, in the past has really sort of been relegated to a starting pitcher or two. And so, yeah, I do think it's sustainable, and it's the strength of their team.
All right, Jesse. So I'm looking at some of the best teams in the league. You've got the Yankees with the best run differential, and they've only got the 1.5 game lead over Tampa. And you've got, we mentioned Chicago, and they're playing triple digits in run differential. They just got a 2 game lead over Milwaukee. And then I look at Detroit, and they're right there, plus 99 in the run differential, but they've got the only double-digit lead in a division in all of baseball at 11.5 over Cleveland. I know Tarek Skubal's great, but how are they doing it with the rest of the squad?
Jesse, don't they lead the league in wins of 5 runs or more too? Don't they?
Yeah,
they hammer people.
Yeah, their offense is sneaky good. Kerry Carpenter, for example, nobody knows his name outside
he just
of
got
Detroit.
one yesterday.
Yeah. Kerry Carpenter's sneaky power. Riley Green and Torkelson, they're a lot of peak versions of themselves in that lineup. They rediscovered Javi Baez, who's hitting 290. There's just a peak version of a lot of guys going on in that lineup. And then, yeah, they have the classic ace, but behind him is pretty good pitchers in Mize, and Flaherty's had his ups and downs, but he's pretty darn good. It's just a sneaky good team. I mean, and team is a key word. It's just not all Skubal. And it's not all one hitter. It's just, there's a lot of reminders of the Cubs in there, to be honest. It's a well-balanced lineup.
I agree.
But the difference is Skubal. He's the difference maker. He's the stopper that I was talking about. Cubs use their offense as a stopper. Skubal will stop losing skids. So, and also the division's a little depressed. It's not as good as it was last year, where 3 teams made the playoffs. And, I'm really disappointed in Kansas City. I thought they'd be better. They have a good pitching staff, but not enough hitting. I've never been a big believer in Minnesota, and Cleveland's underachieving a little bit compared to last year. So they've been great, and the division's a little depressed, and that's how you end up with an 11.5 game lead.
That's interesting, too, because last year in the playoffs, they had all the anomalies, right? The lack of stolen bases by one particular individual, the batting average by one particular individual, the home runs by one particular individual, all anomalies statistically, and you turn around and They have the huge lead, and Gleyber Torres is leading them in OBP. It doesn't – sneaky's a good word because it doesn't make a lot of sense on paper. How is Gleyber Torres leading your team in OBP?
What a signing he's been. I mean, Scott Harris is a sharp guy. He's a sharp guy. They run the bases as well as anybody, even though the stolen base totals aren't great. They go first, third, second home. They put pressure on the opposing team. I mean, when you talk about managers – someone once told me you could put 30 names in a hat and pick one out, and they'd probably be good enough to manage. There's a couple that probably don't belong, but there's the phrase I use is if a manager gets it or doesn't get it. AJ Hinch gets it. He knows what he's doing. If you're a player, you trust AJ Hinch. He doesn't have to prove anything to you. He's been there. He's done that. He knows what he's doing. There's a few managers that have instant credibility, instant respect, instant trust. That's the best word to use. Where you just look at the end of the dugout and that guy knows what he's doing. And AJ Hinch is among them. So it's just a combination of everything coming together for the Tigers.
So, okay, 2 years ago, this just shows you're talking to a guy that's not very smart with baseball. We picked teams that had been in the playoffs that were picked to not be able to repeat, and a lot of people had the Diamondbacks. I for sure had the Brewers, right? Devin Williams was on the IR. Counsell had left. Pat Murphy comes in. They have the season they have last year, and lo and behold, here they are again. What is it about the Brewers? I mean, their ownership group was like, hey, we're only built to go so far. The fans were outraged in the offseason. Doesn't seem to matter. The Brewers just keep winning. So again, Jesse, I asked the question, how are they doing it?
Yeah, again, sneaky good front office in terms of acquisition and development. And this is what I'm talking about, why other teams, the Pirates are a great example. Okay, they don't spend money. Why aren't they leaning into the new rules? Go get some speed. Go get some defense. Milwaukee is just smarter than teams, but I don't understand why necessarily, because everyone sees now with the new rules that speed's important. Defense can overcome, doesn't cost you money, meaning to overcome some other issues. And so that's it. They're just leaning into the new rules more than ever and taking advantage of some acquisitions that fall through the cracks. Some players that other teams don't think maybe as highly of. William Contreras, that'd be, who wouldn't want him? He was top 5 MVP last year. So, like, just using him as an example, they just are ahead of the game. I don't quite understand it when you think about other small market teams. They have meetings every day. Why aren't they talking about, why don't we get some speed? Why don't we get some defense? Maybe it's easier said than done, but there's just a Milwaukee way that's been established, knowing they're not going to spend payroll, and every acquisition and everything through the minor leagues is geared towards that moment of we need speed and defense and pitching on the margins to win. We're not going to have the best of any of it, but we're going to have a well-rounded organization that addresses those things at a low cost, and they do it as well as anyone. That's the best way I can explain it.
Jesse, speaking of teams that people were talking about for regression and maybe did versus didn't, the Orioles looked a couple years ago. They're coming off the 100-win season, first place finish, make the ALDS, get 90-plus wins last year, and then sort of fell off a cliff. It seemed like a lot of people liked the young roster, the way they were constructed, a lot of their pieces. What's gone wrong in Baltimore?
Yeah, I can't tell you what's gone wrong at the plate necessarily, because some of these guys are underachieving. I mean, basically all
of them.
Young guys are so I don't know if there's something in the water there this year. They switched the manager and coaching staff a little bit there. So I don't know, a perfect storm of underachievement at the plate, but I just don't like what the front office thought about what they were going to do on the mound. Like, you need to finish off the rebuild, and maybe that's it. They're missing that veteran on the mound. They're missing that veteran in the lineup that you bring in to finish off the rebuild. Charlie Morton at 40-plus years old, I know he's righted the ship a little bit, but that shouldn't have been it. You let Burns walk and you replace him with Morton. Like, finish the rebuild. Spend that big money on a hitter that can come in and lead the way, or that pitcher that can come in and lead the way. And they didn't do that. They didn't finish the rebuild. So now it's all built very precariously, and if just a couple guys underachieve, it can all fall apart. And that's kind of what happened. That's kind of the way I look at it. You didn't have that foundation with a veteran or two to lead you out of the wilderness when things went south early on. And they've been trying to climb out of it since. That not finishing the rebuild is the best way I put it when it comes to the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, talking all things baseball with the great Jesse Rogers. Jesse, full disclosure, a lot of this is just because I want to be right, but I'm going to try not to ask a leading question. I picked them to win the division, and I think people laughed at me only because I don't know what it was, but I just had a feeling that their offense would come to life. I like St. Louis. I know Ollie gets a hard time sometimes from a pretty loyal fan base. They're only 2 games out of first. Again, kind of one of those teams where I'm wondering how they do it. Have they put themselves in position to maybe be buyers at this stage, and kind of how do you project what St. Louis is doing?
It's been amazing. It's quite the prediction to pick them to win the division when they stated all offseason this is kind of a transition year with John Mozeliak, their executive. So that's a heck of a pick, but they've almost taken advantage of it. I covered them in spring training. I've seen them a lot, and the pressure was off for the first time in St. Louis in forever. They could just play loose and free, and if things don't go well, they're going to break up the team anyway in July, and they sort of came together. I think it started with Arenado turning down the trade to Houston, said, well, okay, well, let's just go for it in those sense. I'm talking about the locker room felt that way. They added very little in the offseason, and I really think Ollie's been okay in terms of just letting them go play. Like, I feel like Marmo and that team played with pressure the last few years, especially Marmo as a first-time manager. But now this year, there was all sorts of talk about Molina or Pujols taking over and breaking up the team, and they just kind of went out there and played. and their pitching staff has been much better than I thought they'd be.
Yeah.
Their lineup's been, we use that word sneaky, pretty good. If they're buyers, I think it'll be on the margins. I think they would love to make the playoffs and just roll the dice and go from there like a lot of teams. First of all, it's a seller's market. There's not a lot out there in this moment. There might be by the end of this month. But just like the offseason, I don't think St. Louis is going to do a ton at the trade deadline. They're just going to kind of go for it a little bit here and hope they can just continue to play this well. They're pretty well-rounded. In my mind, they don't do anything great. They don't do anything poorly either. They just do things well, and if they can keep it up, maybe they can sneak in.
Maybe it's neither. But who should be better than they are in your opinion right now? The Rangers or the Diamondbacks?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a tough call for me. I've been a Diamondbacks guy. I mean, they faced each other in the World Series a couple of years ago. I've always liked what Arizona has sort of done in a smaller market. But at some point, you can't overcome injuries. Now, having said that, their bullpen's been a disaster, even with the injuries or without the injuries. It's just been terrible. The Rangers should probably be better. The Diamondbacks have at least the excuse of the injuries. The Rangers, their young hitters have not grown the way they thought. Their offseason acquisitions haven't been as good as they hoped. And even though they have this pitching staff with the DeGrom's renaissance and Tyler Mahle and Evaldi, and like it's a good pitching staff, but they're 2 games under. They should be better. But it's their lineup now, and I know there was a piece, I think, in The Athletic where they investigated what's happening at home in terms of the hitting environment, but it's the same for both teams. And you're 24-18 at home, so just because Globe Life Field isn't playing the way you hope doesn't mean you can't win there. So I'm confused why the Rangers aren't better with Bochy there. I know the front office is really confused by their offense overall. So yeah, they should be better. At least the Diamondbacks can blame the injuries.
If you had the draft tomorrow, you talked about young hitters not achieving, and they've both been hurt. Would you take Corbin Carroll or Adley Rutschman?
I would take Corbin Carroll. Yeah, I would take Corbin Carroll. Yeah, I look, there's a lot to like about Adley, and look, the position he plays might put him over the edge, but Carroll has that dynamic power and speed thing that works in today's game. It's a tough call. It's a little bit of apples and oranges. Switch hitter, catcher, that does give him an advantage. But now that, Carroll had that moment early last year for 3 months, really, but that combination of power and speed just plays in today's game. I'm sure GMs would feel differently because he's a catcher, but I just like the ability to hit for power and speed and do everything on a baseball diamond. Adley can do a lot. I just think Corbin is one of the best 5 players in the National League.
So, Jesse, I got to ask this, even though my partner here is a Dodgers fan.
And I refrain.
I'm going to ask for you because I'm fascinated by this. At what point do the constant pitching injuries catch up with the Dodgers? Because I thought it was going to be last year when they're throwing bullpen games in the World Series. Apparently that wasn't the case, but they just keep throwing more guys on the shelf seemingly every day. Like, is there a tipping point for you where they're like, hey, this is no longer sustainable to actually field a baseball team when you can't have 5 starting pitchers on a day in, day out basis?
I mean, a few years ago, I would have said yes, there's a tipping point, but it feels like times have changed. I just mentioned the Cubs offense is their stopper. I mean, that applies to the Dodgers times 10.
Sure.
They're not going more than a few games without scoring a bunch of runs. So it's kind of like if their offense ever cooled off for a long period of time, those pitching issues would really surface. But yeah, you said it right. They won a World Series with a lot of bullpen games. 2025 MLB baseball is about, bullpens as much as it is starting pitching, where that wasn't the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I don't know if there's a tipping point. I really don't. They and the Cubs are in first place with starting staffs, ERAs, in the bottom 7 in baseball. That wouldn't have happened a while ago. You couldn't do that with a starting staff with ERAs that high. But that's 2 out of 6 division leaders with ERAs like ranked 24th and worse. So I don't think there's a tipping point because the game has changed.
Mm.
Just let me ask you, if so you're playing the long game and you're Boone and you're in New York, and you can see your flaws a little bit, but then you're kind of thinking about best case scenario too. If you're Boone and you're a New York fan, what are you looking to kind of next level, considering your team is they're pretty much who we think they are. I don't know what their
Yeah.
margin for growth is, right? This seems like who the Yankees are. What do you think?
No, I think that's true. You asked me about Milwaukee earlier. The conversations that Brewers organization has on a daily basis must sound different than the Yankees, who basically just pay to slug
Yeah.
and pitching. That's it. Like, you want to talk about how organizations work differently because of payroll. Yankees are trying to slug the ball and, of course, pitch. The Brewers have to do all these little things on the margins to be just as good. I mean, it's very similar record. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just like, get healthy, be as dynamic in the lineup as you can. It's not about speed. It's not about defense. And we saw that hurt them in the World Series. But look, they got to the World Series, and they're in first place. So you'd like to have a dynamic team, and they're a little bit more athletic, which you have there than they were at the beginning of like last year per se. Maybe a little bit better defensively, but not much. It's really about slug and getting Stanton going, and that just make sure they have enough lefties to be pair with the righties. And now that Soto's gone, so that you're right. It's like Boone has a lot less to do than Pat Murphy on the Brewers, in my estimation. I'm sure he would disagree with me.
Jesse, I'm going to be a little selfish here and ask about the Red Sox quickly. Do I have anything to look forward to this year, or do I just need to suffer through like 12 more Walker Buehler starts?
Oh, easy. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. No, I think they're cooked. I
Okay.
think they're cooked. I was in San Francisco when Devers faced them, and they won the first game, and it feels like they haven't won a game since. I know they did, but
I think just a single game since, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like they're cooked, and I don't like the rhetoric coming from some teams, and the Red Sox are one of them. And this happens when you're on an 80-plus win pace, and you're trying to get to a 90-win pace. And what I'm getting at is just like, it feels like they're chasing wins and not the process. When you're in first place, you just talk about process and let things take care of themselves. The rhetoric right here, like, we're in the hunt, we're 3 out of the wild card. They're just like chasing wins. And when you're chasing wins, you're in a bad spot. And I feel like the Diamondbacks are a little bit like that. They're just like trying to find that avenue that gets them to 80 in the AL, especially maybe 86, 87 that might get them in. Where in the NL, you probably need more like 90. I just just didn't like what I heard when I was around them. They're trying to now that Devers is gone, trying to figure out exactly how this offense is going to work. And Cora must have said it once, if he said it a dozen times. We just have to pitch. We just have to pitch. Well, you can't put that much pressure on one part of your team to carry you to the playoffs. So I don't like the vibe there. Look, they have good young players. Maybe it'll be better in the future, but just don't see the path for them to get to the playoffs now.
Jesse, I wanted to talk about the Angels here for a second, but I'll close with them. Better story going right now for you in terms of, well, they're kind of interesting. Are the Blue Jays finally who they thought they were, or are the Reds more who they're finally supposed to be? Both teams are interesting. They get a lot of preseason love, and here they are actually playing fairly well. Is this about where they should have been?
Well, first of all, I'll address all three teams because I am shocked by the Angels.
Me too. I think that's the best story in baseball for a team with a losing record.
I thought the Athletics would finish well ahead of them, to be honest. I really thought the A's were going to be better. The Angels, I can't believe how good they are. I just didn't love their off season. I spent some time with their GM, Perry Maniason, and he was telling me, no, it's not as bad as it looks or something. He didn't say it like that, but he liked the combination, and I got to give him credit. It's better than I thought, and they survived without Trout, and it haven't really relied on him the way they have in the past. So the Angels might be the best story in baseball, considering where I thought they'd be. The Reds are not a surprise. They have one of the best starting staffs in the National League. Look, they're only 44-40. They're not great. They're just decent, and they should be better than they were in the past. Francona is a veteran manager. I thought they'd be better. I still wonder about their offense. Can't just all L.A. De La Cruz. I know T.J. Frito had a nice run. It is a starting staff, though, that can contend and put them in a position to do that. And who's your third team?
So
the Blue Jays.
Yeah, the Blue Jays.
Yeah, the Blue Jays are fine. They're better than they have been. I don't love the Blue Jays. They need probably some help on the mound. They're 7 over. That's surprising to me.
Yeah.
But maybe this is what they should have been the last couple years, right? There's a good foundation there. They're still a little too right-handed. I've said this for years. So I think they've been better than I thought for sure. I just don't love them. Like you kind of like them. I don't love them. Same thing with the Reds. I like them. I don't love them.
What do you think you can get from Scherzer?
You know, he and Verlander really remind me of each other for a lot of reasons. They're the same age, basically. You know, if you get a quality start, that's what you want out of those guys. 6 innings, 3 runs. Like, that's kind of what you want. You can't expect the moon. You can't expect ace material. Quality starts. If you can pile up some quality starts, I think you'd be happy with that. Be a leader on that team, that kind of thing. But I don't think you can ask for much more than that.
That's our guy, Jesse Rogers.
Fantastic.
Covers Major League Baseball for ESPN Chicago. Jesse, appreciate the time as always, even if you did have to pee in my Cheerios about the Red Sox. I totally understand. It was great talking to you, Jesse.
I appreciate you, Jesse.
You got that.